and welcome back. I'm Carrie Wheatley with John L. Scott Real Estate, and this is Dawn Snyder with Priority Home Lending. This is part 2 of education on new construction.
Now, before we get started though, we completely skipped out on one of the most important points we wanted to talk about last week. So we're going to start this video, instead of talking about financing, talking about a really important issue that Carrie wants to bring up.
Okay, so something to understand with a lot of these larger builders is that if you walk into one of their homes that they have the model homes and you don't have your favorite realtor with you, then a lot of times they'll kind of rope you in and have you sign something and then you go without representation. Some of them have kind of some goofy rules where you're required to be escorted by your realtor and fill out a card and have them there. Otherwise, they refuse to work with your realtor. Not all builders are going to do this, but some of them are a little on the goofy side and do require that. And so just something for you to keep in mind. If you don't have a realtor, cool beans, no big deal. But if you want your own representation, just make sure that you are aware. And before you do that, give your realtor a heads up, or even try and find one if you don't have one. Say, hey, I'm in this situation and I want to make sure that I do have my own representation, someone that's on my side. So just something for you to know.
Very important point.
Sorry.
So on the financing topic, right? So I think that one of the most important things to recognize when we're talking about new construction is that there's really two different ways to go. One is custom construction, where you start from scratch, and most cases, or a lot of cases, you're going out and finding your own property and purchasing it and finding your own builder and working on them with the design. And there's a lot of different elements that go into this, and then it's an entirely different type of financing that you use for it. So there's a one-time construction close and a two-time construction close, just depending on how you want to structure it, your individual scenario that you have. And those are much more complicated, and I'm not going to try to put it in a video.
So they're not for everybody. If you are someone that gets really overwhelmed by more steps and way more choices, I mean with custom build, you can choose anything and everything within budget. So for me, that would just be way too overwhelming. So with the spec home, you get the 4 or 5 choices, and then you choose.
Exactly.
And so for my personality, that would be a lot less stressful. But for someone that wants to control every aspect and have their own piece of land and they're not afraid to take those extra steps, then that can be an amazing way to go. And there are financing options available.
Right, and there's simpler financing options than what's available with that custom construction loan. So what we're going to do for a tract home, again, it's typically something where the builders made a lot of the decisions and brought in the land, and they're going to carry the cost of construction so that you just buy it at the end. In those scenarios, what we're working with really is a traditional mortgage loan product, and we just use it in a little bit different way to make the timing work, considering the fact that, with new construction, it's probably not done when you go under contract, and we're going to have to wait for it.
Yes.
And so it definitely changes the way that we're going to do that loan. And in particular, talking about locking the interest rate in. So on a traditional home purchase for an existing home, when you go under contract, if you have a 30 or 45 day escrow, then I'm probably going to call you right away when I get the contract and say, here's what our options are. Let's get this loan locked so that you never have to worry about the interest rate again. Whereas on new construction, if it's not completed at the time that you go under contract, we might actually wait a little while before locking the interest rate. And the reason for that is the longer you lock it in for, the more expensive it tends to be, right? We can lock for 6 or 9 or 12 months out, but when we do that, there is an associated cost with it. And if we don't anticipate a really big negative change in the market, then maybe those costs aren't worth it. And so that's a discussion that we'll have at the time. Yeah. And so typically when you're 45 or 30 days out from the anticipated completion of construction is when we're going to go ahead and lock that loan for you.
And there are some new construction homes that are 30 to 45 days out. They just maybe are homes that were just sitting for longer or were more on the expensive side, so not as many people are interested. I've had people that bought some new construction that were nearly completed. They didn't have hardly any say in the design process, but they got into it a lot early and they were able to lock that loan.
Yeah, so there's a lot of variability in how that works. And the variability, actually, that's something good for you to talk about, because we were discussing before we started the video approval amounts and shopping at the right price point for a new construction home.
Yes. So I believe we talked about a little bit upgrades in the last
we did.
video.
Yeah.
And so just keep in mind, if your realtor says you are approved for, let's just say $300,000, don't go shopping for new construction homes that are $300,000. You need to make sure that you are going fairly below that price so that you can account for the upgrades that you're going to want. He was telling me that a particular builder that I won't mention actually charges an upgrade if you want to have your garage door automatically open. Things that you wouldn't normally think. And a lot of times these things are not necessarily talked about until you're under contract and you're excited. Most builders will have a clause in there that says that the earnest money continues to be refundable until you've had a satisfactory builder's meeting. But like I said, at that point you're excited, you've already envisioned yourself in this home, so it's kind of a good way for them to trap people into something. So good to ask lots and lots of questions before you get wrapped up into anything. Also, something to talk about that I didn't mention before, not every builder does it, but some builders actually do require that the earnest money do be non-refundable after you have the satisfactory builders meeting. Typically, earnest money in a normal situation, you can get it back in multiple ways, like we talked about in one of our first videos. But with new construction, they are building this home the way that you envision it. So they have a little more at stake, and so that's why they make it non-refundable. So it is reasonable, but it is more of a gamble at the same time. So that's something else to keep in mind.
Right, and all of these things, most of them are really positive in some scenarios, or really reasonable for most scenarios, and it's a matter of sitting down to discuss why it is the way it is and what impact that has for you. I think that in real estate and lending in general, a lot of the times there's not a right or a wrong answer. There's only the answer that's right for you in your scenario.
Absolutely.
And I think that based on what we talked about before we started this video, the last really big point is that, there can be a big positive in waiting for that construction to be done, because it gives you more opportunity to save up for your down payment and your closing costs. In fact, some people I was just working with, and we worked together for almost a year between trying to find the right home and then waiting for the construction to be done. They were able to save so much money in that amount of time to put towards their closing costs. But they had the flexibility to be able to do that. The other thing too is that does create a lot longer situation where you don't want to mess with your credit.
Yeah, so it gives you an opportunity to save that extra money. And when my husband and I bought our home, we sat down. It wasn't new construction, but when we sat down and we had a certain amount of time, we came up with a game plan knowing this is how much we're bringing in every month. We will sacrifice these things and we will save X amount of money, which will end up with X amount of money. So in a new construction situation, you can do that. You just have to plan out for 6-9 months, what have you. But you also have to be a lot more diligent in making sure that you don't mess with your credit in that period of time. So you're being held accountable for a lot longer period of time, but you can also save more money. So it just depends what works for you. So it can be great, and it can also be a little more troubling, but it can also be a great way for you to get mastered with being more financially responsible and being diligent with your spending, and can be a lifelong thing that you take with you.
And if you want to talk about some of those skills, we will happily talk about those, because we were really passionate about being financially responsible and creating a solid financial future for yourself. So even if it's not necessarily exactly what we do for a living, we want to have that conversation with you.
Yeah, I truly believe in it. Personally, for me, when I bought my first house and I did that with my husband, it actually completely changed our lives forever in how we handle our finances. And so it was an amazing thing that forced us into a situation where we really had to look at our spending and how we do things on a day-to-day basis with our finances. And I'm forever grateful that I was forced into that position. So
sometimes diversity is a really big positive factor in our lives. Yeah.
So, well, perfect. Well, thank you again for watching. Again, we are on YouTube, Carrie Wheatley Realtor site, and Happy New Year. We hope to speak with a whole bunch of you in this next year, and any kind of assistance that we can have with the home buying or selling process.
Think about buying a home in 2020, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, everyone.